Snow drifted lazily through the midnight sky, coating New York City in a layer of shimmering white. The streets glowed beneath rows of golden Christmas lights, carolers sang at distant corners, and couples laughed arm in arm, their breath turning to mist in the freezing air. Every window on the avenue glowed with warmth and celebration, every window except the one that reflected a small, fragile figure sitting silently on the sidewalk. Her name was Lily. Barely 8 years old, she sat curled up near the entrance of a grand restaurant, her tiny frame wrapped in a worn-out blanket that had lost its color long ago. Her shoes were mismatched, her hands red from the cold, and her lips trembled as she whispered to herself to stay awake. She had been sitting there since evening, watching people walk in and out, dressed in coats that looked warmer than her entire life. Through the restaurant's frosted window, she could see laughter and light, families clinking glasses, couples sharing desserts, waiters carrying trays of steaming food. The aroma of roasted turkey and sweet chocolate filled the air, making her stomach twist with hunger. Still, she said nothing. She had learned that people turned away faster when she spoke. But tonight something inside her told her to try. Just once. The door opened suddenly, letting out a rush of warm air that brushed her frozen face. A tall man stepped out, adjusting his black wool coat and leather gloves. He looked like he had walked straight out of a magazine. His shoes shined, his watch gleamed, and his expression was as cold as the winter wind. His name was Raymond Clark, a millionaire known throughout the city for his sharp mind and unbreakable focus. He had built an empire with no partners, no friends, and no distractions. The world called him successful. He called it survival. Lily looked up at him, her voice small but steady. "Excuse me, sir. May I have your leftovers?" Raymond stopped mid-step. For a moment the noise of the street seemed to fade. He had heard voices like hers before, soft, desperate, and easy to ignore. Usually he kept walking. He didn't believe in charity. He believed in work, effort, and results. But this time something made him look down. The girl's eyes caught him off guard, big, trembling, yet filled with something he hadn't seen in years. Innocence. Her face was thin, her cheeks hollow, but her gaze had warmth, a flicker of life that pulled him back decades, to a time before the world turned him hard. "What's your name?" he asked quietly, his voice lower than usual. "Lily," she whispered, hugging the blanket tighter. "I'm sorry for asking." Raymond said nothing. He looked around, the streets emptying, the snow deepening, and then back at her. "Come inside," he finally said. Lily froze. "Sir?" "You heard me," he replied, opening the door again. "Come on. You'll freeze out here." For a second she thought he might be joking, but when she saw the warmth behind his words, she stood slowly, her small boots crunching in the snow. Inside the restaurant, heads turned immediately. Waiters paused mid-step, and conversations went silent for a heartbeat. The sight of Raymond Clark, the city's most powerful man, walking in with a homeless child was something no one had ever imagined. He ignored the stares. "A table for two," he said simply. The waiter hesitated but nodded quickly. As they sat, Lily kept her eyes low, afraid to touch anything. The tablecloth felt softer than any fabric she had ever known. Raymond noticed her hesitation and said gently, "You can eat whatever you want." When the waiter brought a plate of warm soup and bread, her eyes glistened. She reached for the spoon slowly, her hands trembling not just from cold, but disbelief. The first sip made her close her eyes and smile faintly, whispering, "Thank you, sir." Something in that simple moment broke through Raymond's walls. He watched her, truly watched her, the way she savored every bite, how she whispered thanks after each mouthful, as if each one was a gift. She had manners, grace, and humility that no money could buy. "Where are your parents?" he asked carefully. Lily looked down at the table. "Mama went to heaven last Christmas," she said softly, "and I never knew my dad." The words hit him like a punch. His breath caught as the name Mama echoed in his mind. "What was your mother's name?" he asked, his voice almost trembling. "Elena," she said. The sound of that name made his hand tighten around his glass. Elena, the only woman he had ever truly loved, and the one he had walked away from for the sake of ambition. He could still see her smile in his memory, hear her voice asking him to choose love over money. He had chosen wrong. He had lost her forever. And now, sitting before him was a little girl with Elena's eyes, Elena's gentleness, and Elena's quiet courage. For the first time in years, Raymond Clark felt something melt inside his chest. The world outside continued to snow, but for him, time had stopped. He didn't know how or why, but he was certain of one thing. This little girl was about to change his life forever. Inside the grand restaurant, golden chandeliers sparkled above them like captured stars. The hum of laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the faint melody of Christmas carols filled the air. But for Lily, it all felt like a dream. She sat across from the well-dressed man who had brought her in, unsure if any of this was real. The warmth from the fireplace brushed against her face, melting away the cold that had clung to her for days. Raymond Clark sat silently, his posture perfect, his expression unreadable, but his thoughts were tangled in a way they hadn't been for years. He had dined with world leaders, billionaires, and celebrities, yet never before had he felt so human. The waiter approached, nervous but professional. "Sir, what would you like us to serve?" Raymond glanced at Lily, then at the menu. "Bring her something warm," he said, his tone softer than usual. "And the same for me." When the food arrived, steaming soup, roasted chicken, and soft bread, Lily stared at the plate in disbelief. Her eyes shimmered like glass under candlelight. "You can eat," he said gently. "Go on." She hesitated for a second, then picked up the spoon carefully, as if afraid to break something precious. The first bite made her eyes close for a moment, as though she was trying to remember what comfort tasted like. It's so good," she whispered, her voice trembling. Raymond leaned back, watching her. The people at other tables occasionally looked their way, whispering, but he didn't care. The city could talk all it wanted. Nothing else mattered. "Do you live nearby?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not really. I stay near the old bridge with my dog, Max, but he's gone now." "He got sick." Her voice cracked and she lowered her spoon. Raymond felt a sting in his chest, something sharp and unfamiliar. He had never cared about anyone's story before. Success had taught him to harden his heart, but this child's honesty broke through every layer of armor. "And your mother?" he asked, his voice hesitant, almost afraid of the answer. Lily looked down at the tablecloth, tracing patterns with her finger. "Mama went to heaven last Christmas. She told me to be brave, even if I get lonely." For a few seconds, the world around them seemed to blur. Raymond's hand, which had been steady all evening, began to tremble slightly. He swallowed hard, forcing the next question out. "What was her name?" Lily looked up, her eyes glistening in the candlelight. "Elena," she said softly. The sound of that name sliced through the noise of the restaurant. Raymond froze. His mind raced back to the past, to a small apartment filled with laughter, the smell of coffee on rainy mornings, and a woman with a smile that could calm any storm. Elena. The woman who had once loved him beyond measure, the one he had left behind chasing power. His fingers tightened around his glass until it trembled. Could this be a coincidence? Or was life finally confronting him with the truth he had buried for years? Lily noticed the change in his expression. "Are you okay, sir?" she asked, her voice full of concern. He blinked rapidly, forcing a weak smile. "Yes. Yes, I'm fine," he lied, though nothing felt fine. He studied her again, the curve of her face, the shade of her hair, even the way she tilted her head when she spoke. Everything reminded him of Elena. His mind and heart waged a silent war, but deep inside, he already knew. Something in his soul whispered what his mind refused to accept. He reached for his wallet and placed a small note beside her plate. Not money, but his card. "If you ever need anything, call me," he said, his tone calm but heavy. Lily's eyes widened. "Really?" he nodded. "Really?" She smiled, an innocent, grateful smile that lit up the space between them like a miracle. In that moment, Raymond realized it wasn't he who had helped her tonight. It was she who had helped him, reminding him what compassion felt like, what humanity meant. As they finished their meal, he didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but one truth had begun to bloom quietly in his heart. The past he had tried to forget was sitting right in front of him, smiling with the same eyes as the woman he had once loved. That night, Raymond couldn't sleep. He sat alone in his penthouse office, the city lights stretching endlessly below him, his reflection trapped in the dark glass. The image staring back wasn't the powerful, confident man the world knew. It was someone older, haunted, and afraid. He replayed every moment of dinner in his mind. The way Lily smiled shyly, how she whispered "thank you" after every bite, and most of all, the name she had spoken, Elena. He hadn't heard that name in 20 years, yet it still carried the power to break him. Elena had been everything, his warmth, his balance, his peace, but he had walked away to chase success, convincing himself that love was a distraction. When she left without a word, he buried the memory under layers of ambition, and now, out of nowhere, that memory had returned in the form of a hungry little girl with Elena's eyes. His heart whispered the impossible, but his mind demanded proof. The next morning, Raymond called his private assistant and asked for the hospital records of orphan children named Lily, who had been admitted near the old bridge area. His assistant, surprised by the personal request, didn't ask questions. By noon, the reports arrived. One name matched, Lily Thompson. No listed father. Mother deceased, Elena Thompson. Raymond's breath caught in his throat as he read the document. It wasn't a coincidence. It couldn't be. He stared at the paper for what felt like hours, unable to move. All the walls he had built over decades, the arrogance, the detachment, the pride, collapsed in silence. His hands trembled as he whispered, "She's mine." Those words felt heavier than any truth he had ever known. But he needed to be sure. That afternoon, he sent someone to find Lily. By evening, his driver brought her to his office, nervous but smiling shyly. "You said if I ever need anything, I can come," she said softly. He nodded, forcing a small smile. "Of course. I just wanted to make sure you're safe." He invited her to sit and handed her a cup of hot chocolate. As she drank, he couldn't stop staring. Every feature of her face was a mirror of Elena's. His heart screamed the truth his mind still hesitated to believe. After a few gentle questions, he said quietly, "Lily, can I take you to the hospital tomorrow? It's just a small checkup, nothing scary." She nodded without hesitation. The next morning, they went together. The doctors ran a few tests while Raymond waited outside, pacing, every second stretching like an eternity. When the nurse finally handed him the envelope, his hands shook as he opened it. The words blurred through his tears, but one line stood out clearly. Paternity match, 99.9%. The paper slipped from his fingers. He covered his face, tears breaking free after years of being locked behind pride. Lily was his daughter. The little girl who had asked for his leftovers was his own blood, the child he never knew he had, the piece of Elena that life had mercifully returned to him. When he went back into the room, Lily looked up at him with curious eyes. "Are you okay, sir?" she asked softly. He knelt before her, his voice trembling. "Lily, I'm not just someone helping you. I'm your father." She froze, the words hanging in the air between them. "My father?" she whispered, almost afraid to believe it. He nodded, tears streaming down his face as he pulled her into his arms. For the first time in his life, Raymond Clark cried openly. Not for loss, not for guilt, but for a miracle. In that single moment, every deal, every dollar, every success he had ever chased meant nothing. He had found what truly mattered, love, family, and a second chance he never thought he deserved. Christmas Eve returned, but this year, Raymond's mansion didn't echo with silence. It was alive with laughter, warmth, and the sound of something he hadn't felt in decades: family. The enormous living room, once a sterile space of glass and marble, now shimmered with color. A tall Christmas tree stood proudly near the fireplace, covered in golden ornaments and soft white lights that danced like stars. Beneath it, dozens of wrapped gifts surrounded a small pair of pink shoes, the same shoes Lily had worn the night he met her. She sat cross-legged on the rug, giggling as she tried to untangle a string of fairy lights, her soft voice filling the room with joy. Raymond watched her from the couch, his heart swelling every time she smiled. The emptiness that had once haunted him was gone. He had spent years chasing numbers, buying companies, and conquering empires, but none of it had brought him peace. Now, as he saw Lily decorating the tree with a paper angel she had made herself, he understood how wrong he had been. "You missed a spot," he teased gently. Lily looked up and grinned. "Then you help me, Daddy." The word hit him like sunlight. Daddy. It was the first time she had said it. For a moment he couldn't speak. He walked over, knelt beside her, and together they placed the angel at the top of the tree. When they stepped back, the room glowed in perfect harmony. Later that night, as snow fell softly outside, Raymond stood by the window looking up at the sky. The city stretched out below, bright, cold, and distant, but he no longer felt alone in it. Lily came running up, her little hands holding a small picture frame. "I found this in your drawer," she said. It was an old photograph of Elena, smiling on a summer day long ago. Raymond knelt down, his eyes glistening. "That's your mother," he whispered. She was the kindest soul I ever knew." Lily stared at the picture for a long moment, then looked up at him. "Do you think she can see us?" Raymond smiled faintly, his voice breaking. "I know she can." She hugged him tightly, and as he held her close, he felt the warmth of something eternal. The feeling that maybe, just maybe, Elena had never really left. That night, Raymond couldn't resist doing one last thing. He gathered all the expensive wine bottles and unopened gifts he had once collected for show and instead filled his car with toys, food, and warm blankets. He drove back to the same street where he had first found Lily, where other children still sat in the cold, hungry and forgotten. One by one he handed them gifts, kneeling to meet their eyes, his voice soft and kind. "No one should be alone on Christmas," he said. When reporters later asked why one of the city's richest men had suddenly donated millions to orphan shelters and opened free homes for children, his answer was simple: "Because a little girl once asked me for my leftovers and gave me back my life." As he returned home, Lily was waiting at the door, wrapped in her new red sweater, her eyes glowing brighter than the Christmas lights. He lifted her into his arms, kissed her forehead and whispered, "Merry Christmas, my miracle." She looked up at the snowy sky and whispered softly, "Thank you, Mama." And at that moment, through the falling snow, a single star shone brighter than all the rest, as if heaven itself was smiling down at them, blessing a story born from pain, loss, and the most beautiful miracle of all, love.